Okay, so welcome back. Awesome turnout after the lunch break. Um, so let me introduce Burak Arikan, who is a network artist and not only an artist, he's also a scientist in previous life. Right? He also does serious stuff. I'm an art historian and I have nothing to do with art. No, I'm not kidding. So basically, he will talk about something he calls the network does not exist, it has to be created. And I think this is an awesome topic as basically it poses this difference between what in the database community we call class conceptualism versus class realism. So class realism is the positivist guys who believe that if you have a category in your database that actually that category exists in the real world, like tables exist in the real world, while class conceptualists do not agree. They only agree that the concept of table exists in your database is not necessarily something which exists in the real world. And in my past, when I worked for a database company for 12 years, I was a very radical class conceptualist, and so therefore I like this title very much. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me well? Is it working? Okay, okay. First of all, thanks for inviting me here. I'm coming all the way from Istanbul. It was a long drive, let's say. 23 hours it took. Anyway, so my title, like as you can see, it's called Network as a Creative Medium. And I'm an artist, and as Max mentioned, I used to do research at the MIT Media Lab years ago, and today I do a lot of I combine that research with art, and I do a lot of exhibitions rather than, let's say, like publishing in the research journals and stuff. So you can count the exhibitions as the places where ideas are kind of broadcasted or published in a way. Also, today I will show you some of my work, like maybe three or four works, and I will try to discuss this idea of networks as a creative medium rather than a scientific tool, because for me, like a network is a medium, like the way photography is, or video, or painting, or sculpture is. So that's why I studied its structures and dynamics, like things that change over time, and to understand, what I can do with this medium and how I can, change things with it. And also sometimes I create networks in the form of maps, like we've seen many. And sometimes I develop network systems that actually works, that people can use, to do transactions between each other, like, I alter protocols and stuff. This quote from Jussi Parikka, he talks about, there was a network politics conference in Cambridge in 2010. And it's a very interesting view for me. Like, this is the view of seeing the network as an event rather than a structure, like the way he, Max mentioned a little bit. And it's interesting for me because, it's essential in the way I do work at some point. I got this very interesting photograph yesterday, 2 days ago. This is actually a credit card just released from MasterCard, which has marks on the face, on the side of it. And it's interesting for me because I have an interesting story about that. In 2005, when I was studying at the MIT Media Lab, I was invited to a meeting with MasterCard. They are like one of the sponsors of the Media Lab. All this research is sponsored by them. And they said they have millions of transactions a month, a day, and globally. And they want to examine the behavior of the consumers in different ways. And they asked us to do a visualization with that. And after I left the meeting, I felt a bit uncomfortable, like, what to do with this data, what do they see about me, kind of things. So I thought maybe if I first see what my patterns look like, it will be, interesting. So I settled on this kind of goal, and then I went and downloaded my bank transactions from Bank of America account at the time I was using in Boston, and started putting my data into basic charts, like how frequently I buy things like Starbucks coffee, or MetroCard, or grocery shopping, or ATM cash withdrawals, even how frequent I do these certain events. A year later, graduating from MIT, moving to New York, I got a grant from turbulence.org. It's a very interesting foundation that supports net art. And so using turbulence.org, you may know it or not, and they support net art in general. And using my 3 year of bank transactions data that I collected so far, I developed a live software system that predicts what I buy next every other day. I called it My Pocket, and basically every time I swipe my card, my bank card, the transaction data that goes into the bank is pulled with my username and password into my own database, and then from there some analysis works, and then it generates predictions. And I publish these predictions online, including my own actual transactions openly. So anyone could see what I bought and what I will buy every other day. In this image, what you see, like the red, this is the browser image basically, but it works live. When you look at it, you see what will I buy today, which is the red ones, and then you see the historical transactions. That's the scroll. What you see, the green ones are the predicted transactions, and the white ones are the other unpredicted, let's say, transactions. Since we buy the same things quite often, quite repetitively, my Pocket software was able to predict what I buy next quite often. It was successful, and it only works for me, not for any other person, because I just examined my own patterns and I added rules into it and stuff. As a result of this project, my spending data was no longer exclusive to the banks and financial organizations. This is the actual document that I got at the time from Bank of America. It's the privacy policy. In this document, you see things like, we can share your data with third-party, agents or financial services, marketing, retail companies. And they also say in this document, like it says, even if you request that we not share information with third parties, we may still share this information. This is real. So. To be able to make these predictions, I created a network model. It's a simple one, actually. It's a similarity network between my transactions, and they are similar if they share the same day of the week, for instance, or they share the same category. And then, there's a little movie of this as well. I made, in this movie, what you see is the day-by-day transactions, and there's a little cursor there that moves over time. And every time you look at it, you see the transaction of that day and its connections to the past transactions, which are not turned on as nodes. And colors on the edges change based on the intensity of the forces. This is a typical force-directed layout algorithm that you may use all the time. And the colors change, when the connection is strong, they turn into bright, and they are darker when the forces are rested. And this is an interesting drawing tool, I think, in a way. So, using these network models, and also adding rules into it, I was able to predict, what I buy every day. Also, from this project, I created another, let's say, tool, other objects, which I call predicted objects. These are basically the receipts that I collected during my transactions, and I put them into a box. Every time the correct prediction happens, I pick them up from the box and then mark them with a stamp, a green stamp. You can see on top a little bit, and the probability of this prediction. And they are the correct predictions, basically. And in a way, I think these objects are the physical evidences of a prediction, I feel. And I compare this type of approach to the well-known Marcel Duchamp idea. He was one of the founders of the conceptual art, and at his time when he was living in 1910, 1913, let's say, these days those years he invented this idea of conceptual, or let's say picking up an object and call it his own work, and these were called ready-mades at the time, and his objects were found in the past, and I call these receipts ready-mades found in the future. as opposed to Marcel Duchamp's idea. And I also exhibit these pieces of paper, as installations. And as here, what you see is like an installation from Neuberger Museum of Art in New York, upstate New York. The image that's live, and as I use my card, it's like a living performance. You can see my updates on the wall. And on the right side, you see the model itself, network model, is an animation form. It just moves. You can see that as well and see kind of the reason about it a little bit. And the objects are on these pedestals there, like with the spots on top. So as I exhibited my work, and penetrated into the art networks or art communities in general, I saw, how status, privilege, and sometimes secrecy are quite strong, and they are driving factors in the art ecosystem.
The microphone.
Is it now okay? No?
Censored.
It says on. Hello, can you hear me? Okay. So as I dive into this world of art, I became interested in how these like invisible forces are really driving the art world. And when I say art world, I mean the the community of people like artists, the museum directors, critics, creators, dealers, collectors, advisors, writers, directors, all kinds. And also the institutional actors like galleries, museums, schools, residency programs, biennales, and art fairs, etc. And in between them, there are multiples of connections. Like you can imagine things like influence, like an artist is influenced by another artist, an author reviews an artist, etc. So I made a series of mapping work to explore the nature of the society of art. In 2009, I was invited to a group show about institutional critique, which is a topic quite revisited in the art history. This exhibition has had 20 artists whose names are there. This is in Istanbul, and I asked each artist to provide me a list of past group shows they have been to. And I made a model from that, which is basically an artist is exhibited with another artist, and there's a connection between them. And I think it's a strong connection, a strong relationship, because a group show is significant. It makes a connection, a personal connection between two persons, or a conceptual connection in the art history, also, or in art theory, also a historical connection in the, if you just look at the books and stuff, they always mention these exhibitions as, significant moments. So I did the research and collected around 750 unique group exhibitions dated from 1981 to 2010. And after 3 months of research, basically we had like 5,000 plus artist names who participated in these group shows. And it turned, I put this data, made a huge database and put it into like a force-directed layout algorithm again, something that I made in Java program. I'll show you a kind of a zoomable version of that. I think this will do it. Yeah. Imagine like Google Maps. You can zoom in and you see high-resolution tiles here. This is the map, how it looks like from the far. And in this map, some areas, like here, for instance, this cluster itself, you see a lot of artists from Turkey, young artists who work with new media, new types of media, I should say. Photography, video is like considered new in this world. And also artists like here who work with, like, who are modern painters or sculptors, let's say, that kind of stuff. More like they were big names in the past, and they are themselves, like they always exhibited together somehow. And some artists here in this area who are the between these two generations, and they are like quite international now, and they are well known in the world, in the art circles in the world. And you see sometimes like artists like here, for instance, who are not in any cluster, which means obviously they really participate with other artists, or they basically work together with other artists and curators as well. And you can say they might have a quite a outlier style or something. I don't know what. But I don't really read my maps. I think that that's something that I do a bit different than science. I just make it and then leave it to comments, basically. Also, let's move on with this. As a continuation of this work, I looked at the relationships between artists and collectors. And in this art society, they are quite influential. Who buys what from whom, who has what piece from which artist, etc. And some collectors do in-depth collecting, many pieces from few artists. Some do lateral collecting, like few pieces from many artists. And the intensity of these connections are the weights of the edges in this model. Another hand sketch. I always work with hand sketches and go with computation later. And again, it's a quite powerful relationship in the art world because this information is quite private and sacred. Like no one can access it. Like who has what? If you can see it only if you are in the apartment of the collectors or something like that. So I did an ethnographic research and went collector by collector and talked to them, asked to convey a list of their artists in their collection. And I had to convince them, to make this information public as well. So it was a hard job. And I found 120 individual collectors in Turkey. I say individual because there are also institutional collectors in Turkey. And then I was able to reach half of them only, like around 60 of them. And then from that 60 people, I was able to get only 19 collectors participate in this map. So it's not a full capture of the reality. In a way, you can say it's a partial, but it's still interesting because the information is private normally. You can't see it anywhere. It's not an existing database or whatsoever. So I made the database myself, also made the map of it at the same time. So people were really, when I was exhibiting this work, people are coming and taking notes from the map, etc. All these things happen. Also, I made this work both as a print and as a multi-touch wall, like large iPad. Imagine that, where visitors can really navigate this map and kind of explore themselves, who's where, etc. And there's a little movie about it. You can get an idea of how it looks. And this is, I should say, this is an ongoing research. So I will do some more work. I think, especially in Central Europe. I will do some exhibitions in Geneva this year, and then there I will be adding data from institutional research, institutional collectors as well. See, some nodes are not on, so they have to turn on, turn off these nodes. So it's like the exploration mode of the network diagram. Also, because of the projector here behind the screen, you have very low resolution, so it's hard to put all of data into a screen like this. So it's necessary to make a print in that sense. Okay. So last year, in the Berlin Biennale, made an open call and asked artists to provide their political inclination in the application form, like their opinion, their political inclination in the form. And they collected this data from all these artists, the applicants, to the Biennale, which was around 5,000 people all over the world, and they didn't know what to do with this data. And somehow they found me, and I was invited to the Biennale. It's an interesting position. So, and I just went through this data and made a network map of artists and their political inclinations. This is a two-mode network again. Like black nodes are the artist names, red ones are the political ideas, or ideologies, sometimes identities. And there's around 400 unique political ideas here, and applied as a large wall print, and people were able to look around and check out the nodes and stuff, and the relationships, follow by hand and navigate in the map on the wall. Again, I put this in the wall because I wanted to have a, the resolution that I need, because normally you can't project such a complex image onto a, with a projector. It's impossible today with today's technology. Imagine like 6-point, let's say font, the smallest, and then 5,000 of them everywhere. It's crazy. So Also, like in this map, what you can find is like very popular concepts, like leftist, rightist, not leftist, but mostly leftist, and environmentalist, green in Europe. They were all over, and then they were like visible in the center of the map. And towards the periphery, you see more eclectic ideas and ideologies. It's hard to name now, but basically, this is still ongoing. By the way, you can check out if you ever go to Berlin somehow. It's towards till the end of this month. Some art. This is interesting. Some artists, you can see, Joe Janowski, for instance, the environmentalist and feminist at the same time. Or anti-capitalist and feminist at the same time, and you have all these kind of weird, like interesting, like places. Also, artists without the connections exist in the map, like this, like the one there. They are the ones who left the application blank, that area. So they are also in the map as like a, part of this map research. What struck me most, I think, some artists have normally conflicting political opinions, like things like, imagine like, a rightist and environmentalist, a leftist and masculinist, an anarchist and liberal at the same time. How can you be that, But it happens. People, maybe some jokes in it, also they can do jokes. Yeah, so this is what it is, and I've done many works like this, but I just want to show you some samples of that. And now I will go on with these workshops that I've been doing in the world. In 2007, I designed this course at NYU, Interactive Telecommunications Program, ITP, and called Creative Networking. I designed the course like 10 courses, and then four project, and 14-week course typical. As you can see, the topics here. It starts with graph theory, and then it goes on with topology, different basic ideas of network analysis, mapping. And then the second chapter is about the dynamics of networks, like how do you write a protocol between two nodes, so that they can interact, in some interesting way, and how do you do routing, and then some more global ideas like contagion and swarming and these type of things, with lots of examples from artists and also lots of, let's say, hands-on work. Every student did a project, like sonifications, visualizations, like running systems, like with gadgets and stuff. I forgot now. Then I took this class and turned it into a workshop, like zipped most part of it, especially the first part, the mapping, let's say, part, the structure part, and I've been doing these networks, these workshops now, like with many different groups of people, like from artists to activists, designers, architects, all kinds of students, business people sometimes. This is from the Biennale just a few months ago. You see the map, the work at the back, and the exhibition space is turned into a workshop, and then we do work there for a day. And in these workshops, participants basically start from hand-drawn simple graph models. They sketch graphs, and then they gradually build complex diagrams. And one example is like how the rubble of 9/11 was distributed in the world. It's not a huge network diagram, but it's interesting research. And this is, I think, the gender-based art, like what kind of similar concepts exist in the gender-based art. She was interested in that, doing research in this area. She made her map first, and then like flows of animal herds, in a certain geography, etc. And then participants use online resources to find their data, of course, in these workshops. Sometimes, like Wikipedia is a great resource, or existing databases. Sometimes their own resources, some emails, etc. And they also make personal maps using their own knowledge, from their minds, and they make sometimes complete imaginary maps. They sketch many network models, like a lot of ideas in a short amount of time. And sometimes they organize their data in their actual, tables, like the way we should do in Excel, like on the corner. And we discuss these diagrams. This is the most important part of this workshop. We first do the hands-on work and then show our work to each other, and then talk about it basically. And we learn from each other's work by comparison, especially the models. None of these works are complete, of course, like the way you can expect from a science work. They're all ideas that are creative. That's why I call creative networking. You just really create quickly and then iterate quickly on your models. Sometimes, of course, they use post-its, to move around the nodes. And then what's very interesting kind of emerged from these workshops is the use of existing maps as a background. For instance, in this is maybe you know this map in the back. This is the map of science, quite famous, like from 2004, I think. It was done, I forgot, somewhere in Europe. And in this map, we project this on the wall and then draw on top of that, like something like that. You basically copy the map from the actual drawing and then work on it. Like in this map, what you see is the participants here. They put the artists who work in these science disciplines. It's an interesting thing. Like, I mean, this goes historically to like the art and experiments in art and technology, like Roger mentioned, and like all different artists in this world, like Guy Debord, for instance, like he's into psychology, geography, of course, and then some other things, film, I think, no, economics there. So they connected the artist itself to the science field, then which makes another graph, basically. In the Sao Paulo Biennale, it was 2 years ago, I think, with the students who were actually the assistants of the creators in the Biennale, they made an alternative map of the exhibition based on their own conceptual ideas, like how things relate to each other, in fact, from their point of view. So it's a quite subjective way of doing things, and of course, people do a lot of versions while drawing these things. Hand-drawn maps are very hard; it becomes messy very quickly, and so you have to draw, one after another, a lot of versions. And sometimes they rewire their map. This is the first version, a second version, more readable, more interesting. I went to Mongolia to do workshops there as well. It was interesting with the artists who are not technological at all, just more traditional way of doing works like sculpture, painting, etc. And they were great in performance, by the way, I should say, the Mongolian artists. And like we together made a big map of the Mongolian cultural symbols, how they are related to each other. The details of this, I don't have time to show everything, but it's interesting. I can show you later if you want to. I have the photographs with me, like how different Mongolian symbols, cultural symbols, are connected to each other based on these artists' perspective. And I also work with NGOs a lot, like the human rights organizations, civil society groups. They are big in Europe, in Turkey as well, of course. A lot of violation of human rights there. What we do together is to actually make like organizational analysis of these groups. Normally, NGOs, they have not much capital or whatsoever, so they always have to collaborate with all the other NGOs around them, internationally, locally. So it's useful for them to make network diagrams together and then kind of understand their own organizational behavior. And in one of these workshops, artists, NGOs, activists, I should say, from France and from Turkey, MIG Europe, they work on migration. The one in Turkey, some Alevi groups, I forgot their name now. And they have the similar funding resources, like funding sources. They have similar, lobbying actions. In fact, they made a kind of a taxonomy of the NGO relationships in this workshop. You can see they do advocacy together, they do campaigns together, they do reporting, lobbying, street action, legal assistance, finance. They fund each other sometimes. In these workshops, one of them we did work with the anti-nuclear power movement. A handmade sketch of the Environmental Law Association in Turkey, and then its connections to all the media, the Russian nuclear companies, etc., etc. It's a big, controversial, let's say, map, and they turn this map into a organized map in a computer program. I provide the participants some tools. It started as basic tools that I was designing in Java and on desktop. Then I started making actual online tools that you can really put up your data and then share with each other instantly. So oftentimes in these workshops, participants, they started doing translating their handmade maps to computer programs very quickly using these online tools that I provide. I'm going to talk about it soon. One example is like, for instance, in the Helsinki Citizens Assembly. This is it's an international organization on human rights, and they made their own maps. Like this is from one of the workshops, a huge map with all the other Helsinki organizations in the world, and they connected each to, basically made the connections. If they collaborated together, they know this idea. They have there in their mind. Like this guy, for instance, he knows all this map. He's just one of the main resources who made the map, basically. You can see here. And a young person helps him to basically translate this data into a computer program. So with this, I will finish the workshop part. And doing these workshops, I quickly realized that I need to design a tool that's easy to understand and easy to use, because these people normally are not experts or scientists or engineers at all. So technical things can be a bit difficult for them. So I designed a tool, what I call Graph Commons, to use in these workshops, which becomes kind of becoming slowly, getting some traction from other people in the world in general. But before that, I want to discuss some ideas in this network mapping thing. From my artwork and from these workshops, I realized that something that Deleuze and Guattari articulates perfectly, I think. That they say, the diagrammatic or abstract machine, this diagram, does not function to represent something real, but rather a real that is yet to come, a new type of reality. I think it's a wonderful explanation, because if you think about it, when realities or let's say territories are mapped, we collect this data, make a map. And when we have maps at the end. Like when we capture the data, we have the maps. When you capture the reality, we have the maps. But when the maps are used, for an action, it becomes a tool, and then it just creates new realities. And this is a loop. Then we capture this other reality and make a map, and it goes on. So this idea was inspirational for me to design the Graph Commons project. And I want people to actually navigate in these diagrams, as well as see the big picture at the same time, like go between back and forth and use these maps for their own, whatever purposes they can. This is the current homepage now. It's graphcommons.com. Maybe you can see that. You can go online and see, and you can get an invitation to use it. At the moment, it's not fully public because of the possible traffics, whatever. So I keep it safe and closed at the moment. So basically, this is a network mapping tool, a collaborative mapping tool, I should say, and that also acts as a knowledge base of graphs, edited by the people who are using it. And it has, pages like this, for instance. It's like a home dashboard or homepage, and where you can create a relationship from the top. You can say it says add a connection. You can start a connection from there. Like here, for instance, select some types of connections, and we can navigate different graphs that people make, learn about their relationships among people, organizations, or concepts. People really make any kind of notes here. A node can be a user as well in the system. You can be in a map as a node, but you're also a person. You're complex. You have another world. So you can, by double-clicking on any map, and then you go to this person's profile page, or a node's profile page, I call it. And it can be a person, it can be an organization, a concept, an event. Literally, it can be anything: an item, a project, an object. And you see the other activities it has through other people's participations, so you keep navigating between these nodes on and on. And one example from a graph page, imagine it's like YouTube for graphs in a way. Like you have graph pages, you can browse through a lot of graphs, etc. And this is a network of world kitchens through shared ingredients. This can be useful for the computational gastronomy. I forgot who was doing that. Somebody made this in these workshops. Actually, made a map of the ingredients and and which connections they have in different cultures. Like the Spanish kitchen, Turkish kitchen, this that. And here you can see also the representation of the nodes with some icons. a place icon for the location or the culture, let's say, and a kind of object item, green, for the ingredient. I'll show you, also want to show you actual running system. I preloaded some pages. What's that? Back here, for instance. Homepage. There's a lot of graphs made by different people. You see the names who initiated these graphs, and then you can see other people who actually come and join these graphs. So there's a collaboration nature, like a bit like Wikipedia, more structured data system. A lot of different things, like this is from, for instance, the Berlin Biennale. Let's look at some examples. A profile page again. I follow people who can make maps. Probably some of them don't do maps, and I have graphs that I'm in. Somebody can put me into a graph. There are graphs that I'm editing, and there are also graphs that are public. So you can set up any graph as a public or private graph, which helps you really, you can work privately on a project and then publish it later if you want to, or just keep it secret, etc. I have a list of them here. This is another profile, just as an example, like Daphne Ayas, a friend of mine, who is the director of this museum called Witte de Wit in Rotterdam, Contemporary Art Center. And in this, we did a workshop there in this art center, and the participants, they made a map of the other directors who were the director of this, Witte de Wit, and their other, like the places they have been to in their career somehow. So Daphne is here, for instance. She is now the current director of Witte de Wit, but also she worked at New Museum in New York, Art Hub Asia, an initiative that she started, and she was based in Shanghai a lot, and NYU Shanghai and Performa in New York. This is the performance biennale that they are doing. And you can immediately see other directors, Katrina David, who's now at, I think, Centre Pompidou, etc. And then double-clicking on Daphne, I can go to her profile, and then see other maps. For instance, like she's also in the curators who work with the same artist in Turkey map. Let's check that out. Where is she? Somewhere here. So she's similar to these the curators like Emre Baykal, Arzu Yayıntaş, Fulya Erdemci. Fulya Erdemci will be the director of the Biennale of Istanbul coming up 2013. I can explore different connections like this if this is added. And here on the right side, you see the editors of this graph. There are many, and these people can be invited. I can invite someone, I can invite Max to work on it, blah, blah, I can change its privacy. This is friends only now, but I can make it public or private, all these options like we know from social network sites a lot. And there's a little basic analysis here, the most central degree centrality based nodes. And I will add more, obviously, like between the centrality and things like that. And you can have an image and share it on email, etc., etc. And underneath, there's a list of the connections you have. You can comment on any connection. Oh, this is not true. This is actually you can start talking about these relationships, and you can also have weights, and obviously edges can have weights sometimes, etc. So I will finish it here, and there are a lot of examples. You can go online and check it out, and also if you can email me if you want to try it. It's all there. And graphcommons.com also have this Twitter account called @graphcommons, obviously, and so you can check out some updates and stuff there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So he just proved that art is serious, right? That art is not serious. Actually, we ran a little bit over time, but I think we do a couple of questions, right? So I have actually one. So Marcel Duchamp also was a big collector of receipts, and he has actually one I think it doesn't work. So I hand the microphone over. He has one particular collection which is called the White Box, where he tries to find out how you can represent 4 dimensions on a 2-dimensional piece of paper, which is not possible. And it begins with one sentence, which I think is very long along these lines. He says, the orgasm is the four-dimensional object par excellence. And it actually says, basically, he puts that in front to say, basically, there is objects which you actually cannot document, right? Whatever you do to the network, whatever you, if you do a picture of the network, right, it's not going to be the real thing. It's not going to be an orgasm, right? And I think that's a very important function of art, right? Where art can actually do things which science can do it because it would not stand up to the, you would not get it across peer review, but nevertheless, it's super useful. And I'm thinking, or my question would be, how would you locate yourself there? Are you moving back and forth? Are you avoiding the peer review? Do you think it's more productive working this way than the other way, or what is the decision process there?
Very interesting question, definitely. I'm quite a postmodern subject in this sense, so I move between things all the time. Sometimes, like here a little bit, I'm in a conference now, right? Like 2 months ago, I was in an exhibition, which is an art exhibition. You don't have very critical questions there. So definitely moving between these different, let's say, contexts a lot. I also sometimes write myself, and one of the missing things in art is like a good critique. Often it's always true, historically true, always. So, but on the other hand, I find like art more independent. Like for instance, I don't have to stick to some institutional frameworks. For instance, as I say, like an exhibition is like publication. Sometimes, at least it has a historical reference you can use the whole time, and and also the way I work. Also, like as you can see, my art is it's useful. If you say this in Europe, in art communities in general, they're useful art. What is that? So I position myself, explicitly sometimes like that in this area that's in between things. I both make something that's useful that you can use like any science work or any engineering work, but also you can just experience it.
I think we take one more question.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks. My name is Jack Couples. My question was, when you did a lot of these workshops and maybe commissions, have you worked with any memory-based maps, and how's that affected your own kind of practice?
Like specifically for memory, I'm sure I don't remember every participant's work, but people definitely did maps like that. People, I should say, very simply and basically start from their social networks. Like they map out, friends they know, relatives, etc., and then go around and do maps of their location, like where I go to school, office, and then do some more conceptual work. And there are artists who makes historical maps as well. That's maybe a little related to memory and their own history sometimes, and other times more global, like world historical things. I think diagram is very useful for when you have like a when it's about history, like it's like a recapturing of memory or something. Okay, that's what I can say.
Let's thank Burak again. Thank you very much.